Hello, friend. This is Legal Design Thinking in Real Life, and I'm your host, Hannele Korhonen. This live series is provided to you by Lawyers Design School, that is a learning hub for lawyers and legal teams to adopt the skills and mindset of legal design. I'm here with Mel Flanagan today to explore the topic of visualizing laws, among other things. And Mel is the founder of a social enterprise, Nook Studios, and she's based in Sydney, Australia. Her work is in many ways about access to justice, and I love that the word open keeps repeating in her work. We'll find more about that too today. Hello, Mel, and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be having a bit of a chat about our work and sharing it with everyone.
Great. How is Sydney this evening for you? It's morning for us, but evening for you.
It's been absolutely beautiful, and it's been about over 30 degrees today, so it's a very warm summer day. So, but yeah, the sun is still shining and it's lovely. So thank you.
Oh, beautiful. And if you are watching this live, please join the discussion with your comments and questions so that we can answer them as well. But hey, Mel, let's start with you and Nook Studios. Would you like to give us a little bit about your background and story, and also about Nook Studios?
Yep, sure. So I might just share my screen because I'm a very visual person. So let me just do that. And great. So Nook is a social enterprise, which I started back in 2008, actually. So my background was working in theatre and film. I've worked in visual effects and animations. I've worked in big creative tech. The team is, all the work we do is around the social and environmental issues. And so we work with designers, artists, storytellers, developers, lots of makers. And data analysts. And so all the work we do is really around kind of bringing people and government and industry together to kind of make sense of information. So I guess the best thing, just in a nutshell, we sort of humanize and visualize data and processes. We make information accessible, usable and engaging. And we really, like this simplification, not a simplification, but simply explaining laws and making them easy to understand, follow and improve is something that is a foundation of our work. And we also work to support change makers and innovators as well all over the world. We work on, so we work with governments, we work with community organisations, we work with First Nations organisations, and we also work with a lot of NGOs. We get to have a lot of fun sometimes. And I'm really grateful I've got an extraordinary team of incredibly talented artists. So this is an example of something we did for future transport strategy. So whenever someone's got like a sticky community engagement project that they need to do and they don't really quite know how to communicate all this complex information, they come to us. And so with this was, we do a lot of sort of visualizing policy and trying to figure out, the plans that governments are making. We do a lot of map making as well, which is really great. And there's a lot of laws that are embedded in maps. So that's one area that I'm really interested in as well. But this sort of map making and helping people understand what decisions or plans governments have, those maps are often quite technical. A lot of the time what we do is create these sort of like story maps to help people engage with like why these decisions are being made. So you can see that one on the right, which was the story around, the expansion of Sydney and infrastructure projects across New South Wales. The other thing we do is we do a lot of advocacy around how to design. And so this audience-first approach, so this, like everyone talks about sort of human-centered design, is really around sort of like making sure that people think about content first, data, their audience, do the research, do a strategy in content design, because in the technical world, there's not a lot of understanding of kind of content and design more broadly. And we find, particularly in business and in particular in government, the technology usually comes first, and in IT, the information comes first. And so we do a lot of this sort of tap dancing around, best kind of practice in design, and that's thinking, more around the I before the T. Think about humans, think about people, and then think about your information before you start making decisions about, big tech and the technology. And I guess the other thing that, and we would have, this is where we connected, Hanil, which was the more and more so we've been thinking about that sort of like designing for the planet, and that sort of really making sure that when people think about design, that it's not just the human that is at the center of the design process and all of the laws that we're creating. We're thinking about the planet and then, how the impact of people, information design, data and technology. And so you can see the technology is down there. It's there, but it's quite small. But, we've been designing a lot of these systems and processes and laws over the years, and it hasn't really done our planet very well, which is, here we are in a climate crisis and looking at biodiversity loss and all of those things. So our practice really is around how can we embed like thinking about the planet in everything that we're doing, and how we can weave those into laws and make them really effective as well.
Oh, I love that visualization about the planet being the biggest P, because as you said many times, we start with the technology, and then I talk a lot about people centricity and human centricity, but there is actually even a bigger context to all of this, and it couldn't be more timely.
And we share our planet with a lot of other species. Yes. And that's the thing that, and this is, people are concerned about the environment and degradation of environment, but also biodiversity. And so, animals can't speak for themselves. So it's up to us humans to, to really consider them in the decisions that we're making. And I guess so much of the work we do is around natural resources. And we do a lot of taking very complex information about mining, oil and gas projects, or natural resource projects, infrastructure projects, and making them accessible for communities. So people understand what's happening in their local area, how they can get involved, and what the decision-making processes are, but also, be able to contribute to those decisions as well, being able to participate. So making sure that everyone feels like they're informed, so they're empowered to actually get involved and to have like meaningful engagement, but also contribute data as well, or be able to contribute to analysing laws or regulations or rules and going, it doesn't really work, and these are the reasons why. Because so much of lawmaking is done with lawyers, and it's not really done with the people that are kind of really going to be impacted by those laws.
Talking about laws, you mentioned when you shared on social media about this event, you mentioned that you just discovered that you're a legal designer too. What's your history with legal design, or what kind of relationship do you have with this space?
It's very new. I've been doing it for a wee while now, but it's quite new. I guess my background, being a theatre maker and filmmaker, and doing all the work that I've done, like contracting and thinking about legal issues like a copyright, trademark, making sure that people have contracts, and doing deals, negotiating. It's part of the role when you're a filmmaker. And so I've always had sort of legal practice as part of my. And again, I didn't study law. I've been, learning on practice on the job. But I think that. So some of that has come through with just that understanding of like kind of legal practice. But I think that the role of legal design is something that I came across this community because a friend of mine who's a legal designer who's in Sydney, Emily McLeod, was like, hey, there's a legal design summit happening. You should absolutely come along. And I looked up the Legal Design Summit and my mind was blown. I was like, this is awesome. There is a whole community of people out there I had no idea existed. So I was really grateful to have the opportunity to present a keynote at the Legal Design Summit in this year in 2023. and meet the most extraordinary group of really passionate, talented people who were working across lots of different elements of law. And I kind of felt so welcome. And I was like, I found my people, you know. So it was really good. And it was really great because it was, I guess what we do is slightly different. I mean, there's so many people working on different things, but one of the reasons that I was invited was because of the sort of environmental nature of what we do. And so, yeah, so it's, the more I delve into it, the more excited I get, and the more I want to just be able to, meet cool people who are doing all sorts of work, visualizing as well. And there's some incredible artists. And so that for me is the artistry around it is really fantastic.
Oh, that's perfect. Environmental issues is obviously a big part of your work, but then open government is another interesting topic that I wanted to learn more from you, because I saw that in your work. So how would you define open government, and what is the essence of this approach?
Yeah, so the open government movement's been around for a while. Back in 2011, there was about 7 countries who got together to create a platform for sharing that knowledge around openness and sharing best practice and really kind of supporting each other. It was the US, it was the Philippines, there's Mexico, there's a whole, and it was the UK, I think it's the UK. There was a bunch of, I lost the list now, but it's on the Nook website, you can find it, and it's on the opengovernment.org. So there's a national organisation that is basically supporting countries all over the world around openness, and openness being access to information, it's being responsive to citizens, it's transforming systems, and a lot of it's around kind of digital transformation. It's open data. There's a whole bunch of different kind of ways for governments to be open. So Australia signed up in 2015 to the Open Government Partnership. We're one of the 70 countries. Some are more active than others. But part of the issue around open government is a lot of people don't know about it. And so I've been doing advocacy for access to information for a long time and inclusion of communities in decisions. And it was really, when I found out that it was actually a thing, we started doing some active sort of creating content to help people in government understand what open government is, that there's a whole bunch of people all over the world doing this work, so they don't feel like they're alone and they're crazy people doing this transparency stuff, and that there's, and be able to kind of enable them to be able to be change makers in their organisation. So have the confidence to go, I know what this open government thing is, I know what I can do. And I'll just share a little something with you, because we've been creating content over the years pro bono, and we actually got some funding from a philanthropic foundation to create some content, and it's a little content kit to help people explain openness. So as I said, like the elements of open government is really around sort of transparency and access to information. There's inclusion. So gender is a really big open government theme. And obviously the participation. So participation in decision-making, safety of civic participation. And then there's the transformation and the kind of transition, transitioning. And so I work a lot around energy transition and natural resources, as I mentioned. And I think the other thing there's the stuff that we kind of focus on in terms of our advocacy is around explaining open government. It's a lot to do with the financial transparency in contracting, actually. And then, like that human-centered design versus, the ecological design, like thinking about your planet, which is in public service design and delivery, and making sure people get involved in those processes, through to things like procurement, grants, access to information about contracts, supply chains, taxes and royalties when you're thinking about natural resource governance. What's the plan for the energy transition? It also goes through to things like trade deals. A lot of it is around corruption prevention and putting systems like in place where it prevents corruption. So there's a big anti-corruption movement, but I'm really interested in what are the systems that we can design for integrity that, stop corruption from actually happening. And then there's the stuff like open budgets, and then there's the sort of open process and open data and some of the stuff that we do. So makingopen.org is the platform that we're developing. As I mentioned, we got some funding from the Illuminate Foundation to do some research with over 100 different advocates from all over the world to kind of understand what they needed to explain and what they found difficult. And so we've created a series of infographics, illustrations, and some messages that help people explain all this stuff. And as I mentioned, like financial transparency is something that we're working on quite a lot. And we're working with a First Nations organisation at the moment looking at access to financial information for First Nations communities in Australia. And so that's like your revenues are coming into the communities, what budgets and how budgets are being formed, where the spending, where's the spending going, and like who's behind the contracts, and where is the room for communities to be more involved in that sort of like decision-making processes about who's actually delivering services in their local area. So yeah, it's a big piece of work. But yeah.
So important. And what would you say, what role could legal design have to enable people to participate in decision making?
Oh, look, I think that there's a massive role for legal design and lawyers and legal designers and collaborations, really, like bringing people together to actually work on making information more accessible. So if I think about, the laws are made for lawyers. They're actually like people are meant to follow them. Governments are meant to follow them. Businesses are meant to follow them, but they're actually made, for like they're designed for lawyers. The same goes with contracts as well. And, things are like constitutions are made for lawyers as well. I mean, constitutions are pretty impenetrable too. And we've just had, a big referendum in Australia, which did not go, well in terms of changing our constitution to give some sort of fairly basic rights to our First Nations community. These things are really important. And if people don't engage with them, they don't know what they're meant to be following. And secondly, what they need to do to actually improve them or why they should be improved. So I think legal design and lawyers and the legal design community of designers and strategists, like it's really important for all of us to come together to really make laws more accessible. And that's why, the visual contracts and comic contracts and things like that are just, when it comes to employment or any other thing really, are just so important, because then we're reaching those multicultural audiences, people who, English or whatever their language isn't their first language, who, their literary skills are low. Like it's just, it makes common sense to do that. And it's 2023, people. We can send people to the moon. So we can't, we did that in 1969. But, we can send people to the moon, but we can't make our information accessible. Like it's just not okay. But I think more importantly, it's just we have to, we need to be designing documents for people who they're meant to serve. And I think that means like, with regulations and legislation, it's like, what's it for? What's it trying to achieve? Understanding. And I'll share some of, obviously, this work soon. But it's really like, who does it apply to? And what are the rules? And what are the obligations? Like, who's responsible for what? And then, is it effective and how do you measure your success? Like, they are all the things that I think, like, so much of it's just about the document, but it's actually all about all of those things and making sure that that's clear and people can follow it to make it effective and to be able to, for them to actually have effect. So I think, by us all coming together and really working on this, then we can really make some sort of social changes and also obviously environmental changes as well.
For sure. And legal design can it feels like it can like open up this space, like regulatory space or like space to really people come together and work together to make this more accessible, more understandable, more visual.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's a place for machine learning and artificial intelligence in this as well. I mean, ChatGPT and everything is just going gangbusters, but you still need humans. There needs to be that human element and bringing people together and making sure that the laws are written in a way or visualized in a way that makes sense to them. But I think some of that heavy lifting can really be done by some AI, and that's some of the playing that we're doing at the moment with looking at laws is going, okay, what can we play with and what can be visualized and what not? And but yeah, it's a pretty exciting time, really. So yeah, it's good.
For sure. Hey, let's look at your case study. You promised to share something concrete about your work.
Yes. So I wanted to. So this is an example. I'll just take people through. And because you've seen some of this at the Legal Design Summit, but I guess one of the things that we're all constantly aware of, and this is, I'll just show some examples of some of the work that we've done previously. But I mean, those who have ever had to engage with legislation know how unwieldy it can be. And so if you're from a company or if you're from a community, you have, in order to go back to figuring out what the rules are and whether a company is meant to follow or what a government has decided the conditions of a law are, this is what people need to engage with. And so back in 2012, we were making a mobile web application, which was to help. It was taking data from the New South Wales government about mining oil and gas projects across the state and making it much more accessible for local communities, so they could find the locations of what was happening in their local area. But a really big challenge for people was finding out when the community consultation process was meant to happen. So what we did was this broad interpretation of a number of pieces of legislation to do with petroleum and mining, and then created this pathway to help people understand when community consultation was meant to happen, when environmental reporting was done, and then all the way down to what companies have to go through in order to get to be operating at the extraction stage, and then of course there's a closure stage as well. And through this sort of visualization of this became a really powerful engagement tool. People used to use the word love a lot when they saw it, and they were like, I love that I can see what the obligations are, but also other government departments we shared this with. They were like, now we understand our place in the process. So it was really, we designed it for a community audience, but found that business and other government workers and staff really found it very, very powerful for their work as well. When our minister at the time saw the pathways, so the first one on the left has the planning stage, which is the brown section where you can see there's the environmental impact statements. So that's when environmental impact statements are really created by companies, and that's the first time that most people in the communities understand that something's going to be happening in their local area. And those consultation periods, the statement goes up online for public consultation. People are usually given somewhere between 20, 45 days to comment on these documents. Some of them are up to thousands of pages long, and also contain quite complex data, and they're PDF documents. So that sort of document design and accessibility of those documents is a real issue as well, which we would love to tackle. But so in this story, it's the minister at the time was like, okay, now I understand why everyone's really upset and this process is clearly broken. So on the right-hand side, there's a green consider stage right at the top, and that was where the minister said, okay, the department and the government is responsible for having conversations around, whether this mining is a suitable land use for this particular area. Because what was happening was a lot of companies weren't following the rules and they weren't doing community consultation. There was just a tick box in the form for their application for a license. They ticked it and, the department really wasn't doing the due diligence. So there was a mining license, well, there was a petroleum license that covered the entire Sydney basin that no one really knew about. And so we create these posters because they are they're a great way to, like, you can put them on a wall, you can put them on a table, and they're a really great way to get people around to have constructive conversations. And you can learn a lot by having a visualization where people can kind of go, oh, okay, I care about this, or, oh, that happens at this stage. And so you kind of get to learn a lot about what actually happens in practice as well, and where information is. So this provided a bit of a kind of like a data structure for us when we were making the mobile web application Common Ground. We also created an interactive version as well, which gave an extra layer of information for people to be able to kind of find out, what they were meant to do at each stage and connect across government. So information became much better connected. So as I mentioned, like that mining production application stage is really that part where people are really interested in, and they really want to be able to kind of find more information about that. That led to us, and part of that environmental impact statement process is the environmental laws. And so we were invited to do a sort of process mapping project with the Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment, and that was looking at three parts of the Act, rather. So it was the referral, assessment and approval process pathway. So this was taking, again, that very onerous legislation, and the EPBC Act has been highly criticised and reviewed for not protecting the environment, and it kind of gives a bit of an easy ticket for companies to kind of hack the system, kick the tin down the road, and leading to environmental degradation more than it is protecting it. And a lot of that has to do with most people can't really engage with the information. And so what our role in this project was going in and working with the team, doing some workshops. So we always usually start with sort of a process mapping workshop, and we do a bit of an information journey mapping, looking at all the different people who are meant to be, who engage with the information and meant to be following the rules. And so these pathways were really great because we took that extra there's a few extra layers of information in this one, which is, yes, it's the interpretation of what the legislation says. It's plain languaging that information and helping people understand what they need to do at each step. But it also allowed us to, so many people had to engage lawyers and very expensive consultants to kind of help them navigate this process, because they didn't really know what to do and there wasn't any guidance. So this is like taking a proactive approach and kind of going, okay, so you're at this top stage where you're looking about, at sort of this controlled action assessments. It's like, what do you need to do? And most people don't know how to do surveys. They don't know how to prepare action management plans and all these, things that they need to do. So this was really kind of taking, mapping out, basically it's instructions, it's guidance for people as well. So it's not just interpretation, it's kind of layered with guidance. And as you can see, like there's a lot to this. There's a lot of embedded processes in this particular one. There's a couple of different pathways that people can take. So the poster versions are great because it allows us to kind of get that broader interpretation and we can visualize it. But then the other thing that we did on this project was, because, helping people follow the regulations and legislation, it's an information journey, really. And so the department, their content, and this comes back to how legal design and content strategy really kind of are this beautiful kind of marriage of minds, is that, when it comes to navigating information, like this is what people were having to navigate on the government website. That, of course, when we presented this work to the executives in the department we were working with, everyone took a very, very, very deep breath and went, oh my gosh, this is what people have to engage with. No wonder there's a problem.
So they didn't get it before that. It's so complicated.
No, they didn't. And, I mean, websites are complicated, and particularly websites for organisations that have been around for a long time. And, every 4 years we've got a machinery government and everything shifts around. Don't even get me started on how disruptive that is. I heard the German government don't do that. And I was like, oh, we so need that model here, because everything stops working for about a year and then everyone redoes a website and it's just terrible. But what this led to was the department really taking on board all of our recommendations and creating some very, very accessible information based on our work to be able to help people kind of guide them through. And this sort of, this interactive kind of website that really helped them figure out what it is that they needed to do to help people. So that, I guess that's what I'm saying, is that kind of having that legal design approach and thinking about it, like it filters into other things and it filters into, other areas such as, working with the tech team and the web design team to really kind of like highlight for them and show them through that kind of visualization that this is what people are engaging with. The other really, and the thing that we're doing a lot more of now is thinking about those legislation regulations as an ecosystem, and then how do we visualize that? So I love this visualization, and lots of other people do. Everyone's like, oh, we love this.
It's like stargazing.
It is like stargazing. It's a constellation. Because people have to navigate a lot of different regulations and pieces of legislation. And so being able to map that out, so you go, oh, start here, or if you're there at this point, this is where you go. And because, there's international laws, there's national laws, there's state laws, there's like local laws, there's all these layers, and it's really overwhelming for a lot of people. And this is why, they need lawyers and like very expensive specialists to help them navigate it. And so if you're a small business and you're wanting to do something, obviously they're not going to be doing an offshore petroleum gas storage project, but, in other instances, they can't afford to hire these expensive people, and they just want to figure out what they can do and whether it applies to them. And, often what happens is people just go on and do the thing that they do that harms the environment because they find it's just like it's all too hard or it's all too expensive. And so we actually just need to make it much more accessible for people to really, find ways to follow the rules. The other example that so we did some work with the Transparency International, and inspired by the work that we did on Common Ground, they mapped the mining license processes and environmental, and some chapters did the environmental legislation for about 23 different countries. So we took what was that very sort of kind of business processy sort of process mapping, and then have created a sort of a workflow and a process to help people think about designing legislation and regulations in a way that they can communicate it more easily. And I guess like some of the, this, again, it allows advocates who usually don't get to talk to, industry or get to have conversations with government to be able to put something on the table where you go, this is what we think the process is. It allows people to have those conversations around, oh, is it? Okay, well, how can, what can we do to improve it? And so our African colleagues really love this work, and they for them, it, the feedback's been pretty amazing, where people have said it's a conflict deterrent. Like it allows us to have the shared understanding when we're going in. And yes, we're complaining about something, but we've done the research and we've done this step of trying to figure it out. And so often governments go, oh, that's what we look like. Oh, okay, I see. And you can see things very clearly, like there's no community consultation at all. And in the instance of Transparency International, what they were looking for was areas of vulnerabilities and where decision-making processes are relied on by one person, which leads to a lot of kind of potential corruption risks. And then the last one I'll share, which is kind of building on this work we did for in Australia with Transparency International, our colleagues here, was through a series of roundtables, brought over 40 people together, in person, online, over a year period. And we did this sort of, you'll see that on the left, it's the interpretation of legislation, the actors involved, the sections in the act it refers to, the links to our processes, because it's that thing, like all of these are nested processes. They're all connected to another process at some point. So, and, how long things take, because that's really important for decision, like for, to be able to hold governments to account, but also for applicants to know how long things take, but also for communities as well to understand like how long they've got to be able to kind of engage with different things. And then this one has the process in practice. So it was an interpretation, and it was, using that sort of the knowledge of crime commissioners, academics, people in industry, environmental consultants, environmental defenders, community groups, all kind of came, and people in government and in the Queensland departments going, this is actually what happens. So rather than just doing an interpretation, we can start kind of mapping it out, but then going, this is who's responsible at each different stage, but actually this is what's good about this legislation, but here are some recommendations on how it could be improved and how it could be strengthened. So I think that's sort of, for us, is that sort of beyond the visualization. It's like, how can we bring people to get together to firstly create these sort of visualizations, and feel like they're a part of it, and be able to do that interpretation, but bring all their knowledge in as well, and then bring people together to figure out how we can actually make them better.
Oh, so important. And I love that with your work, you've been able to help also the people working in the government or the public authorities to really open their eyes and see, because I don't think that they are bad people. they just don't realize. They don't realize what they're doing.
They don't realize. Yeah, it's really so interesting. We did it's so interesting. And it's like because I'm the chair of the steering committee for an NGO called Publish What You Pay Australia, and we do, we're part of a global coalition of 1,000 organisations all over the world. So I go to events where there's industry, governments and civil society, and, and we're about kind of like, how do we bring people together to make all this stuff better, get access to the information, but also make the laws stronger and more fit for purpose. And it's amazing, like people look at these and they go, I wish I had one. I want one of those. And when Transparency International did their Madagascar, like the one for the Madagascar mining license process, the mining department there were like, this is amazing. This is so great. We know what we look like now. Like we know what our process looks like. And they framed it and put it on the wall in the government department. Like that's just, when you go, that's something that a civil society organisation who usually gives them a really hard time, like comes up with something that they go, oh, actually, this is something that's really useful for us. Like that's really powerful. And it makes me really happy, because it means that our work, is having some sort of impact, and people can kind of start thinking differently about things too.
I can imagine. But have you faced also resistance, or I'm sure challenges, but also resistance along the way in these projects?
There's always challenges. And I mean, so mostly when we're working with people, it's about working with teams. And so it's really, and sometimes we kind of like working in isolation is not fun. And it's really hard, and it's really complex. But we generally, when we're doing these kind of projects, people really get on board, and they kind of want more, really. And the challenge is we never have like enough budget to be doing like the things that we really want to be doing, which is one of the reasons why we're making a product to help people, everyone do these things, because we can't be everywhere in every country and every place, and we want to be able to enable others to do this work and support everyone. But I think some of the challenges are, I mean, I had to say, like, it's the access to information that's really the hardest thing. Is when people see this, they go, oh, we get it. Oh, we understand the value. So I guess we haven't really come up against much other than, I mean, they're meant to be engagement tools as well. So being able to have, you know, those, sometimes governments are a bit fearful going, oh, you think you know more than we do, but actually we know our stuff. We know our stuff. And actually they don't really. And it's only when they see it visually laid out.
Yeah, it helps them too. It not only helps the citizens or people, but also the agencies.
We had one instance though when we were working on doing a mapping for a transport regulation, and we did the these are all the actors involved, and who's in the these are all the kind of people who have responsibilities. And it was only through creating icons and illustrations of those that they went, oh, we're actually missing like this 5 kind of user groups and people who had applied. And it was only through creating like, the cutesy little icons, they were able to go, oh, okay, all right, now we need to really rethink that. So, because that's, again, that was another people, they were like, no, we know. And it's like, well, like having a picture actually really helps. Pictures tell, they show where the gaps are too. So it's really helpful.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing these concrete projects. Before we go, what would you like to say to someone who'd like to get started with you using visual communications or visual design in their work for clarity and transparency?
I would say, I mean, we're, well, come and talk to us for a start. Always happy to have a chat. Have a look at the Nook website and have a look at some of the examples. And there's a bunch of videos up there as well. And we're going to be designing some workshops too. So that's one of the things that we want to be doing more of, and sharing more stories around examples of, how visual design and storytelling's been used. But look, I think to get started, it's just really simply mapping things out. I mean, this is the thing, like even just so kind of a low fidelity, if you're doing process mapping and like, interpreting legislation, regulation, it's, once you're in the zone, like you need to get into the zone, like you need to allow a chunk of time, get a bunch of people around and make it like a fun party, because it's really helpful when you've got like different perspectives coming in. In terms of other kind of visualizations, it really depends on what you're doing, but there are so many great examples now out there. And again, your work in terms of highlighting the work that people are doing is really important. And we're doing kind of a lot more on the sort of like the visual side. But there's some really inspiring examples, and just get involved with the community. My mind has been blown by some of the talent in this legal design community, seriously. And, I think, following things like the Legal Design Summit and the rest of it is good. But find collaborators. And that's the thing, like collaboration is key when it comes to doing this kind of work. And don't be afraid to experiment. And sketches are great, popping, get some Post-it notes out. But, it's an iterative process, and don't be, and I think for anyone who wants to engage people to do this work, like it takes time. It does take a little bit of patience. There is, iterations, and there's approaches that we take because we've been doing this work for so long that we can fast track stuff. But really, it's make sure you take the time, and and just find some great artists to work with too.
Yeah, it's a journey, but it's a journey worth taking, and I really love the notion of the collaboration. I always say that start with who, and then move to how, so that you have more people to work with.
Yeah, and I think, we find in our work, like some of the people that we work with who are people in government or working in organisations, which are not meant to be creative, or, creativity is not valued in their organisation, or individual creativity is not valued. it's really important to empower those people and to really give them confidence, because I mean, so much of what we do is come in and just help. We're here to support you. We're not going to do the work. We're not going to do all the work. But it's around, I mean, sometimes we do, but, it's really around, like, if someone goes, oh, I've got this sketching stuff, and I'm like, great, because they're the subject matter experts. They're the ones who have had this experience. They know their stuff, or they've heard, and they can interpret. Like, people like that in organizations are, they're gold, and they really need to be encouraged. And I think there's, and I think there's a real fear around, you have to get the consultants in, and they're the experts, and, all the communications people do the comms, and, there's a real kind of like turf kind of wars. And that's when we go in and work with people. It's like breaking down those barriers and going, everyone has creativity in different forms, and we need to honour that and allow people to kind of step up and be that, because that's when you get the really good stuff.
That's the core. That's the beauty.
Yeah,
we are all creative.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining today and taking the time. What are you currently working on, and where can people find more about you and your work?
So what we're currently working on is makingopen.org, which we've got a whole bunch of content that we need to get online, and we're currently fundraising for that. So, and looking for content partners and things like that to kind of tick that project along. And I've just done a massive European tour, which thanks to Legal Design Summit in Helsinki. I was at the Open Government Summit in Estonia. Such amazing, beautiful countries. Thank you so much for having me. Switzerland and the UK. And so I've been collecting stories from all over the world around visual design and some openness as well. So we'll be publishing some of those soon. So I'm really excited about doing that. And of course, with the pathways, we're making a tool that's called Make Paths to help everyone collaborate and design and interpret legislation and regulations, but also things like project life cycles, and sort of like, what's the beginning, what's the end, and what's the beyond a project. So looking at mining, oil and gas and renewable projects. And that's also taking the work that we did in Common Ground, which is how do we make data accessible. So, and then there's the financial transparency project I mentioned that we're working on with First Nations. So that's a lot.
A lot of things going on.
And there's another project which I'm really excited about, which I really want to do, is I've been thinking about constitutions a lot recently. And so there's a new project I want to work on, which is called the Constitution Evolution, and looking at how visualizing constitutions and making them much more accessible for people, and whether we can do some graphic constitutions, and then look at what's been happening and what is a great constitution somewhere in the world, and what are all the different elements that make that. So I found some fellow friends at the Legal Design Summit who are a bit excited about that too. So I'm hoping that will be a fun collaboration. Yeah. But people can find me at nookstudios.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I mean, really, we're always looking for collaborators, looking for partnerships, and really happy to kind of share our knowledge and connect with people wherever we are or they are in the world. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for today, and thank you everybody for watching. It's been great. Thank you, and see you next week. Yeah.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Chat soon. Thanks, Mel. Bye.